welcome inside the Parc Fermé for podcast. What podcast is this? 683 tonight. We're going to be talking about Alonso. I know what you're thinking. Alonso? Who is Alonso anyway? That's what we're going to talk about. Hello, everyone. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. I'm back once again for you to yell at me.
Stop yelling at Todd.
Exactly. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do tonight. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about who the heck is Alonso anyway. We're going to talk about some Formula One news. Before I do that, I have to introduce my guests tonight, which of course means I have to go all the way to the right coast of America and introduce the lovely, the redoubtable
Grace!
Grace, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Grace and I are joined tonight by our other partner in podcast crime. You know him as...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
It's Paul Charsley, the International. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm back in my house now after two, terrifying plane trips to Salt Lake City.
Oh my gosh, yes. I saw the pictures and the carnage.
Man, I tell you wear a face mask for more than 2 hours. Wow. Really hurts your ears, man. I obviously erred on my placement, but my ears were sore for about three days after wearing those.
You putting like salve on the back of your ears?
Yeah, it was nasty,
crazy.
Man. Yeah, you gotta be careful.
You know what Paul was doing? I have some shots of what you were doing out in Salt Lake. If you watch my camera here, you can see this. Here's Paul right here.
Yep. It was raining there.
It's raining, and Paul's drawing that 917 Porsche Longtail there.
Yeah,
see?
I pulled through it. Yeah.
That's what Utah's known for.
Utah known for the rain. It can be raining on one part of Utah and not the other. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't. Now I know.
Another clue.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is, well, very, very interesting. Oh boy. So we've got a lot of things to talk about. Not really, but there is some Formula One news.
Make some stuff up.
Paul, before I get any farther, for those of the podcast, apologize for our listeners only, but for those who would like to watch this podcast on YouTube, yes, we are putting these podcasts on YouTube, and now you can see the three of us on YouTube. I don't know why you'd want to, but if you do, you can. Paul, the pictures behind you are always changing. What do we have? Is that Jimmy Clark? Is that my boy Jimmy?
No, it's Graham.
Oh, it's Graham. Okay.
Graham Hill. So it's another John Rutherford picture.
Awesome.
And then the other one is Gitan's photograph from a French bistro somewhere in Paris. You can't see it from here, but it's got a little Formula One influencer. And then of course I've got my Wolf Formula One t-shirt on today.
Formula One, awesome.
Yeah, won their first race ever. 77, Jody Scheckter. There you go.
That's awesome. I love that shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Canadian flag there. Looks good.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Walter Wolf?
No idea.
Yeah.
Well, I got criticized for my polo wear all the time, but I am wearing the United States Racing Team, so in honor of Memorial Day here.
At least you're on the right country now.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I had your country on here on my last week, I had the Union Jack. I was supporting you. I was representing you, man.
Yeah. As long as you wear it on St. George's Day, just, that's good.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to do that. And Grace is representing this evening with old school
That's right.
Blog.com.
That's right.
Merchandise.
The barcode from, mid-2000s.
That's right. Remember when Ferrari went to the barcode?
Yeah. Because they couldn't have Marlboro
on there.
Yeah.
So what I did is I went and created a bunch of TPF or Formula One blog in barcode and put it on our wear. So it said Formula One blog. If you scanned it, it said formula1blog.com.
Yeah.
And Grace has not quite hung the picture up, but she's leaned
it
in
better.
a better visual
it is.
manner. Yeah.
That's the goal for next week. We'll see by next week's podcast. I feel like maybe I should, the second I get it hung up, we'll stop doing this or something. But yes, it's getting closer. It's propped better, maybe.
It is propped up better, yeah. It's tough, those nails, getting them in the wall and everything. You need tools.
You need a tool or a hammer or something.
We use command strips.
Yeah.
I've
been using a lot of tools this week. Bought my son an Acura Integra, and I'm not a very good upholsterer. I'll find out because I had to change the carpet in it. I'm still working on that.
Wow.
But I did change the whole suspension on that thing, and now it's kind of about 2 inches lower. So he's kind of happy about that.
Yeah.
It was a day's work, but there you go.
Yeah, well, I haven't been doing that. Although I am sitting in the basement and in my office and watching the weather. Here's what it looks like coming in. So
not good.
If I lose signal and this whole podcast dumps, you'll know why. That's a storm front coming.
Looks
in.
like a bit of hail coming there, Todd. You
Yeah,
the car's
kind of
undercover.
does. Yeah, well, there you got to go. And hey, well, you got to squeeze us in. Let's go. Let's talk about some Formula One before the storm comes. All right.
Oh, don't we want to visit esports for the sim racing? That's kind of why I came here, was to talk about the Formula One esport race at Monaco and also Alonso winning the double at Indy this week. I know you were tuning in, Todd.
And did you hear about Daniel Abt?
Oh yeah,
yes. Cheater.
That was terrible. Like you're. Oh, right.
I was gonna hire some like a podcast ringer to come in and do this podcast for me. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah,
it's crazy.
Just wear a Todd mask, or just have your picture taken in one of those face masks now that they can do, and it's all
We can do a deep fake.
Yeah, like it's Mission Impossible, and he's Tom Cruise, right? He just pulls the mask off.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah. So another career down the drain.
Yeah, for what? That was like
€10,000 fine, right?
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
But it wasn't like it was a real, it is a real thing, but it's not the real thing. So it's not like you cheated and you got a big trophy and a lot of money, or I don't know. What did you get out of this? Why was it worth cheating?
I immediately texted Paul and I said, this whole sim racing thing has been...
It's a shitbox.
It's just, the whole thing is a joke.
Well, I think some of the guys, honestly, are just paranoid about ruining their reputation with the sim stuff. Not necessarily cheating to win. I mean, maybe he was, but... that's why a lot of people are apprehensive about even doing it, because I don't know as I want to invest all that time and effort and money to do a sim race, and then I could possibly, get like Mario Andretti got taken out in the first corner at the Indy thing twice. It's like, okay, it's just a game, right? So, but a lot of people are watching it, or a lot of people are talking about it. It's even on Autosport. They're having the report on the race, and some people are taking that seriously about how much talent the actual real driver has, and it's not true. Obviously, it's just, are you good at that game? It's like, I'm pretty good at Monopoly, but I'm not going to get judged on whether I can be a sporting manager of a Aston Martin team due to my Monopoly skills, right? So
it's just, exactly right, Paul. I just, that's why I think the
plus
whole
you
thing
do
is
cheat at
bad,
Monopoly, so
yeah.
1, 6, 1, 7, 8. Oh, free parking. Yeah.
All the hotels on Boardwalk for me. I mean, you're right, and in that sense, like the sponsors, it's a serious thing. You are getting coverage for this, and so I just thought that just seemed like, I don't know, it seemed like a lot.
Yeah, some of these guys. Yeah, so it's tough. They've got egos, and they're out there in front of everybody doing something racy like, and I think some people are actually using it as a judgment point of a driver's talent, and it's not true.
Well, same rules apply in sim racing.
And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
You're no longer a racing driver, Paul.
Well, they had the F1 sim racing. I saw a bit of it, and they no damage. It's like, the driver's just bouncing off the wall every exit. It's like, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, because the announcers kept saying, well, you couldn't do this in real life. Okay, I get that, dude. Like, you don't have to have ever watched Formula One before to realize that you can't go 4 wide in the chicane or something like that. Like, that's not really someplace you can pass people in real life.
Right. Valtteri didn't like it too much, I don't think.
No, but but I guess because if you ran with damage on, your race would be over in like 5 seconds. So
unless you drive with restraint, which you have to do in Monaco, which is then. Anyway, move on. Let's go to real F1 news.
You brought it up.
Todd's falling asleep there. He's just really angry at me. I'm not sure which one. Just glazed over, perhaps. Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe it's better you leave the room when we start talking about this stuff.
I know.
Because spoilers.
I don't want you to go upstairs and kick the dog or the cat or anything.
Yeah.
I know.
And then they went on for like 3.5 minutes about a Monaco Formula One sim race.
Oh my goodness!
I'm firing them all. They're all on furlough.
Yeah.
just
No more
killing me.
zeros. Taking them all.
You're sitting here talking about it. I'm going,
Well, Lottie frickin' God!
oh my gosh. Let's move on to Formula One, shall we?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. First up, Silverstone got some bad news from the UK government. This is hat tip Autosport. Silverstone, this is what Autosport said. Silverstone had been hoping to hold back-to-back Formula One races on the 26th of July and the 2nd of August behind closed doors as part of the push, Autosport says, to get the 2020 season started amid the COVID-19 pandemic. But these plans were dealt a blow when the British government announced last week that F1 personnel would not be exempt from a new regulation that requires all international arrivals to spend 2 weeks in quarantine. Hungary now looks set to follow the opening races planned in Austria in July, but Silverstone has not given up. They have not given up hope of staging a behind closed doors Grand Prix this year, saying it could opt for an August slot if required. Grace, would you like to know what our man Pringle said?
Sure.
Who wouldn't?
I just like hearing you read things to me, so yeah.
Well, sure. He
Do
said, quote, "We've got our original dates that we've been holding and talking around in mid to late July, but actually we've got a degree of flexibility through August as well." That was the managing director, Pringle, told Sky Sports F1. He said, "I don't think that finding a date for Formula One is going to be a problem, or indeed 2 dates. What we need is the green light from the government, and that will take time. In terms of the period we need to stand the venue up without fans present is really relatively short. There's quite a lot of planning that needs to take into account for the COVID-19 implication, and that's new, uncharted territory for us. But everything runs out of a fixed infrastructure. We've got 2 permanent paddock blocks, so we are not talking about putting up too many marquees or fan areas or anything like that." So Silverstone thinking they could still pull this off in August.
Yeah. Basically, they're saying we got nothing going on. So and whenever you want to come,
We're ready.
you know, we don't have to lose $40 million. We get paid for this. We'll just move everyone else around. We're ready when you are, Formula One. But
Right.
this is kind of, you know, when we talked about this whole thing, that's why Silverstone made so much sense at the beginning anyway to me, to get this whole thing going. Why
Right.
Austria was the date and everything was weird, and I don't know, maybe there's something we don't know as to why they picked Austria to be the first one, but it made so much sense that there's so many people in the UK that would be required to go to the races, except for just 2 or 3 other teams. It would much be easier logistically to get that passed through about the quarantine than moving every single team and all their personnel back to the UK and just kind of brushing that off as, now you guys are good. So it always made sense for me to start in the UK for that very reason. There's a lot less moving parts and moving across borders for that initial 2 races. But they go to Austria, then they got to come back, right? But if they'd started the UK, they could go to Austria, do a couple of races within 5 days, kind of like what NASCAR did. Don't have to wait for a whole week. You can do one on Sunday and Wednesday, and then move to Hungary or Hockenheim and knock a couple out, then come back. And now at that point, we're 2 months further away from the beginning of the season. Maybe some of these rules have been laxed a little bit and makes it a little easier to carry on.
And you'd have been, at least 5, 6 races into the season at that
point. Right, exactly. It'd be way, as I said, the more time we can buy for the places with the strictest rules, the better off we are.
Right, and as Tom sent us a link, Paul, with Spain, right, making a decision.
Right. So Spain said, there's no quarantine rules after, was it July 1st or something like that? So they're really laxing the rules. I know Grace is a big fan of that.
That seems crazy. That seems. I mean, I get it. But that seems. I would not be. If I was somebody in Formula One, I would not be okay with that. That's crazy.
I mean, it just depends on, and once again, it's how you structure this thing. People are moving around, right?
Yeah.
But you make the rules strict and as strict as you can, and I think it can all be done. It's not like they're going to send the whole Formula One circus to Spain and go hang out at the beaches and start drinking and high-fiving each other. I still think a lot of restrictions are being in place. It's just what are the rules, to allow people to go across the border. And, the biosphere thing, I think, could work. But the easing of the borders for them to work this biosphere thing has to work also for them to move around and run through the calendar.
Yeah, you'd really have to, as Formula One, come up with your rules and then figure out how to make those rules work in the different countries, right? I mean, that's how I would think about it, because one country may have a laxer standard than what you feel comfortable with. So, but yeah, trying to move from country to country, and especially because, what NASCAR had like 900 people, I think, for their racing. So, that's still a lot of people that you're moving across country. So wouldn't it make sense if you could have, 3 teams that aren't based in England, plus, like Pirelli, and you have some, some of this other support stuff that isn't necessarily in England, but then you wouldn't be moving most of it. Right. So if, we just stuck with 900, then you're only having to move 300 people in instead of all 900 to the next place, Yeah.
So. And there's a lot of things that you're talking about Pirelli, right? Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to move a lot of people for the just Pirelli thing.
Tires.
Just the tires, right? There's a lot of personnel based in each country, certainly in England, that are more than capable of logistically handling the tire situation over a weekend. So, which they're obviously going to have to look. So, I think it's definitely the border thing is tough. I don't, and then even if you did that, they come back to England, then all the staff from all the Formula One teams are then in self-quarantine for 14 days. They can't work on the cars.
Right.
So then, then they come back, they have to work on the cars. Now we're 2 weeks even further away. So
they should just find whatever country has the most tracks and be there. Like if it's Germany, we're just going to run this whole series in Germany, and we're going to move this whole and then that way you could just stay within one country and go to several different tracks.
Right, or at least 2 or 3 that work their borders, sufficiently to make it a bit easier. But there's plenty of tracks in England. I'd love to see Formula One race at Alton Park again. That'd be fun. Not going to happen though, is it?
No, but or Italy or something like maybe that would make it easier too.
The logistics of this is mind-numbing. To your point, Grace, it's finding those regulations within the countries. I know, Paul, just from an IMSA standpoint, you're going state to state. And, different states have different, it'd be different in Laguna than it would at Sebring, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or in Texas at COTA. So those are all things you have to factor in. And with this quarantine thing, I think, to your point, Paul, which is really, I think, germane to the argument, is that the more time that you're buying over the course of the summer, the more apt, or not, depends, but I would suggest that the more apt that these regulations start to loosen up over time. And so maybe in this sense, Silverstone's saying, look, if we can get to August, September, we still feel like we've got open dates, and that time we're thinking that this 14-day quarantine thing may have released by then, So we'll see. Yeah,
you got to make it a bit easier on the government's got their rules, and they can't just blow everything up just because it's Formula One, right? So the more you can work around those rules and change things around a little bit, I think the better. So as I said, I really thought Silverstone was going to be the launch pad for the Formula One season, and haven't heard anything concrete that I understand, and maybe you guys have, but as to why it starts in Austria and not in Silverstone.
And I think everybody should have a sleepover at, like Renault, or not at Renault, at Red Bull. I was going to say at Jordan, or, everybody just go to Milton Keys. We're going to have a big sleepover, right? And we're just going to or everybody go to Wokings, and you're all just going to sleep outside by the pond, and that's what we're going to do, right? So.
Well, there's a little town called Kent.
I love that town. That's my favorite.
That's your big city now. You promoted it so much, become a big city.
Everybody's moving to Kent now.
Everyone's moving into the high rises in Kent.
It is. It used to be a hamlet now because we talked about it.
Yeah.
It's become a village or a small city.
We ruined it.
Yeah.
This podcast ruined it.
Yeah. It's look at it. It's the gentrification of Kent. It's terrible.
Yeah. It's a municipality at this point.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so moving on, have we beat this dead horse until it's moving, giving us some semblance of life? I think we have.
The coronavirus or the next story? Which one
Definitely
are we
beating that to death.
I mean, it's all we've been talking about for
I tweeted,
3 months.
say new normal again, MFer.
It is the new normal, Todd.
Yeah, right. All right.
If I can find face masks that say new normal across them, I'm going to send you some.
I know. I was looking at all this stuff, from the schools and everything. Of course, I live in a different state. I don't live in New York. But it's just like, the updated CDC numbers and reading it. So the chances of my 16-year-old contracting it and dying from it are slightly less than the chances of her getting hit by lightning.
Who has been hit by lightning? Raise your hand.
There you go.
It's like,
So there you go, 66% chance right there.
I think we're going to roll the dice on that one then, I mean, I roll the dice, it's storming right now. I just showed you the map,
Yeah.
Don't go outside, Addie. Whatever, for God's sake, stay in the house, girls. So,
Well, I think, again, it's the asymptomatic part that makes it risky, right?
Yeah, sure. Put on a mask.
If it was just...
New normal.
See, I'm telling you, I'm going to find that hashtag new normal, hashtag blessed. That's going to be your face mask.
New normal face mask. Perfect. If I found one that said hashtag blessed, I'd wear that one.
Absolutely. That would be the best.
That would be the best.
In the corner.
Tommy Hilfiger plaid. Blessed would be perfect. I'm thinking we're on to something. The new Lewis Hamilton collection of face masks. I think we're on to something.
That'll get him the PR he's been looking for, right?
It would. It would keep him out there. I agree. And to your point, Paul, why is Lewis not doing this sim racing? I think for the very reason
I just explained that one.
Yes. I think for the same reason that you just described, So anyway, all right. Let's talk about Aston Martin, shall we?
They're also not racing like Gran Turismo.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that may be a part of it too, right? He has a big deal with Gran Turismo, which
could be.
Yeah, I might play some. So, I mean, he just released a whole new, race Lewis Hamilton Gran Turismo package. So
he may be contractually prevented from doing so.
Yes, right.
Lando's not, though. He'll race anything.
No, that's right. He doesn't care. He'll race it all. So.
Right. Yes. All right. So Aston Martin, we're going to talk about that. So hat tip to Motorsport for this story. Now, Aston Martin, some changes going on over there at Aston Martin. Now, Grace's all-time favorite, David Coulthard, was asked about this whole Sebastian Vettel situation being released by Ferrari at the end of the season. And DC, Grace and I, we're like this with David Coulthard, so we call him DC,
Right.
So we're very close. So DC said that Vettel would be a terrific addition to the Racing Point team in lieu of Sergio Perez, due to Stroll's big investment into the series and the team and Aston Martin, and his entire sort of investment program to find an additional, I think it was 200 million, I read, something like that. They're looking for additional joint investments along with this team to really boost it. Recall also that Toto Wolff invested in this team and bought in for a small percentage of the team as well. So he's got this big initial group of investors. They buy
team or Aston Martin the company?
Aston Martin the company.
Okay.
And they're looking to now tie that together with the team and now become the Aston Martin Formula One team. And so rebuilding this team with a lot of serious capital investment by Stroll's investment group, including Toto Wolff and Aston Martin, DC reckons this would be a perfect opportunity because they could really use a seasoned veteran like Vettel, who knows where all the bodies are buried, who knows how Ferrari runs a team, their philosophy, Red Bull, all of the experience he has. He thought that Vettel would make a great partner to help build this team. Now, I would argue, I think the better driver lineup would be Perez and Vettel. But,
of course.
But that's discounting one very important thing.
I want it now! What's the matter with those twats down there?
That's what that's ignoring.
So
Canadian heartthrob.
Yeah. I do want to, on the Canadian heartthrob, thread here. Has anybody seen what Lance Stroll his hair must be ginormous.
Oh yeah, he's got such thick hair.
Yeah, right. So I saw an interview with Carlos Sainz, because Carlos Sainz also has some really thick hair, and as somebody who has very thin hair, I'm always like, oh, I wish I had hair that was that thick, right? So Carlos Sainz's hair is getting pretty big. I wonder what Lance Stroll's hair must look like in quarantine. It must be.
He must look
none
like
of these people
Chaka
heard
from
of the
Land the
Flowbee.
Lost.
You can still buy the Flowbee.
I know, right?
Cut your own hair. You just need a vacuum cleaner and a hose. You're done.
I need to find a picture of Chaka from Land of the Lost. I bet that's what
Yes. I just wonder. I mean, it's a total aside, but I was just like, and I also like the
little kid in Road Warrior.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, the wild one.
The wild kid. That's what he would look like. I don't know what that kid's name was, but he stowed away on the 18-wheeler with the man with no name.
Mm.
Yeah, so I just wonder. I also thought it was funny in the Will Buxton Carlos Sainz interview. Will Buxton asked him, like, how do you feel about knowing that Leclerc is going to be in a car longer than you will, because they're going to use last year's car next year.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, thanks, Will. I wasn't very nervous about that, but now that you've put that thought into my head, thanks a lot. Now I'm very anxious about going to Ferrari. Thanks a lot, dude. It was a funny moment that he was just sort of,
as a pro, he'll be fine.
Great. Yeah. I'm sure he will be too, but it was just really in that moment where he went, oh shit.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
That's great. I'm anxious now, Will. Thanks a lot. But
and they have your apartment about an hour away from Maranello, so every time you got a long commute, man.
Right. Good luck with that.
Yeah, you might be late for some meetings, and that will not bode well for you.
No. But yeah,
they've set you up a Winnebago out there. They thought it'd be better than a double wide, but they've set you up a Winnebago there, a little caravan for you to live out of. It's close to Montañas, though. You can get good food.
There you go. That's all you need. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, get rid of Stroll. Stroll's a nightmare. Keep Perez. Perez is where it's at, right?
Well, heck yes. It doesn't take a genius to know that Perez is awesome.
You like my face? You like it?
Yes, Checo, we do like your pace.
Now, do you think Lawrence is trying to pull a Jackie Stewart and try and sell his individual team to the manufacturer kind of thing, and then get all his money back and then some pretty quickly here?
Could be.
That'd be good. And unload your son and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that could be totally. But I was wondering too that because they're only still existing as a team in large part to Checo, so I don't know how that works out either. It's not as if he's just some dude that's rolled in and they can roll him right out again. I mean, they can, but
They can, yeah.
But it'd be kind of jerky too.
I just don't see Vettel going there. I don't think
he doesn't want to go there.
I don't think his personality fits that group.
Right.
Honestly, and there's no reason for him to go somewhere for his last couple of years to help a team build up its, competitiveness. I mean, I can see him going to Mercedes, but I cannot see him going to Mercedes.
Yeah, DC said Vettel would be a terrific addition to Racing Point, not the other way around, right?
Yeah,
right, and he's not in it for other people at this point, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there are some other changes going on over there. According to a report in the Financial Times, Andy Palmer, who's been the CEO since 2014 at Aston Martin Group, is going to be replaced by AMG boss Tobias Moores on Tuesday. That would be tomorrow. Now, the move comes on the back of a difficult financial situation for Aston Martin. Their share price collapsed down to £19 when it was floated back in October 2018 to around 35 pence. Now, Paul, what is a pence, Paul? What is that? Is that half a
nickel?
Half a cockle, mate?
Is that a shekel?
It's somewhat like a cent, Todd. There's 100 of them in a pound. There's 100 cents in a dollar.
Awesome.
It's really not that difficult.
Yeah. Is that like 2 bits? I don't know. What is that, Paul?
It's a shilling and a farthing. Then you cut it up.
I just like that you clarified that this was tomorrow, because I don't know what today is. I don't know what tomorrow is. I just know today is
I obviously didn't. I wasn't expecting to do a podcast today. I thought it was Sunday.
Yeah,
there you go.
This is podcast day. That's all I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, they've got that. Aston Martin has not confirmed the arrival of Moores, but did issue a statement saying that it was reviewing its internal structure.
Well, they have a day.
They have a day, and it's probably tomorrow. Here's what the statement said, Grace, quote, "The company confirms that it's reviewing its management team, and a further announcement will be made as and when appropriate," end quote.
Yeah.
Good. A lot of information there.
I've been in the same room, and my brother's been talking to Bias, actually. Obviously, his company deals with AMG, so he's a pretty highfalutin guy, a very important guy in that group. Yes, yes, he's one of those guys that you make time for him rather than the other way around. So I definitely don't think it's a minor move to move him over to lead Aston Martin. I think he's been
to prize him away from AMG is a pretty big deal.
I think it's a big deal. I think it's probably a challenge that he'd probably want, you know. But yeah, he's certainly not a lower end guy that they're just kind of bringing in to fill a position. I think it would be a pretty significant move, and he would be a pretty significant figure for Aston Martin from
this
there
is
on
kind
out.
of a turnaround hire. Then somebody that's going to come in and turn the whole thing around and make it profitable.
So is this going to make them a Mercedes B team? Is that I mean, that's what the rumor's been, right?
Right. Well, it certainly would make it a lot stronger, I thought, right?
Definitely be a Mercedes. I guess in that sense, Paul, Vettel would be driving a Mercedes.
Yeah. Well, it's. I mean,
did you like that?
Yeah. Well, but obviously, there's been a tie between Mercedes and Aston. You know, Aston have been using Mercedes engines, etc.
Well, and this year's been called the Pink Mercedes. They took their design cue from it, right?
Right. There you go. So they've been stealing everything. So there's definitely been some technical ties already between Aston and Mercedes. So it's not unfathomable at all. Obviously, if Tobias takes over Aston, it's more than the F1 team, right? He's not taking over the F1 team. The F1 team is just going to be a part of trying to turn a manufacturer around. Right. And, which, when you look at the stock price, you're like, well, how can they even have a race team? You're right. You know, we're already questioning what's going to happen with Renault, with Alpine shutting down, and, you know, all the manufacturers being in a bit of difficulty. It's hard for them, I would think, in the public eye, to justify going F1 race and spending the millions that it does when they're laying off people, right? Really tough. So I know there's a lot of financial wizardry going on there behind the scenes with the stock price and who's buying what and everything, that they're trying to kind of pull off the Band-Aid, or plaster, as we say in England, right? And then start again is what I think they're trying to do with Aston. And it's a pretty harsh drop for sure, because I did have stock in Aston Martin. But let's just hope it, you know, I think they're bringing in some serious dudes if this is what's going to happen to turn this deal around. They've got some good financial clout behind it to help bring it up to something better than maybe it was for a very long time.
Well, I mean, so you're a sporting director for a team that is running an Aston Martin in IMSA. And so you have
I had some questions. Yeah.
And that's what I was just going to ask you. You know, apart from Formula One, you could see this Formula One. So the Formula One team independent, your team independent, securing Aston Martin racing cars. Do you see this move bringing Tobias in? Is he a racer, Paul? Do you feel that he's pretty much excited about continuing that sports car journey through the works team?
I don't know that, but we just know in his blood, being a part of AMG, that's a sport brand of a manufacturer. So he's obviously, AMG is always involved in all the racing activities Mercedes have. So he's a pivotal factor in when and where they go racing in the GT standards. I'm not sure he has much to do with the F1 side of things, but he's definitely fully involved in all the sports car stuff. So that's definitely on his plate, and probably in his heart. I don't know, but they've definitely always seen it as an advantageous thing to do for Mercedes. So I wouldn't see why he would change his mind now for Aston Martin. I've had some questions on, where is the customer support coming from, etc. Because you just don't know when this happens, what is a profit side of the business and what is, obviously it'd be tough for Aston Martin sports cars to be having factory teams right now, perhaps, but it's certainly it's a customer racing sport, that's actually a profitable side of the business. You're building parts, you're selling parts, you're selling engineering, you're, parting out engineers, etc. from your position and charging that to another team. So hopefully that stays as it was, because I thought, just from my experience at Daytona, that it was a really well-run customer support program. And I've seen several of them, and I'd say it's up above some of those that I've seen before. I won't mention them, but it was a really good professional group, even though it was a small group, right? So I hopefully they keep it running as it is and don't do any massive changes and completely move over that customer support to a different initiative, because ProDrive are basically in charge of that right now.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of changes he brings in. And I still think that this is a developing story in total. You know, in aggregate, when you look at it in aggregate, with Stroll coming in, his investment group buying Aston Martin, he's got a team that he bought. Now that he's wanting to merge the two, what does that look like? How does that knock on from Aston Martin's sports car program? How much do they go all in with Formula One as a works team, or are they going to keep that separate and be a supplier? Very similar to what they're doing with your team. So it's really interesting to see how this, and then this whole tie-in with Mercedes. You've got Toto Wolff, who's part of investment. You know, a lot of people saying, well, does that mean Toto, his contract's at the end 2020, so his contract is at its end? Will he stay with Mercedes because he invested in the Aston Martin element? Would he move over to Racing Point? I don't know that that's the case. I think, knowing Toto, I don't know him personally, but having seen him move from where he started into Williams, into investments first in the business world, then into Williams, then moving over to Mercedes, you know, it takes a chunk. It takes a lot of energy to do what he's done with Mercedes. We could argue that he took over from what was secure and established by Ross Brawn, and I would agree with that. But to become the winning juggernaut team boss that he's been, it takes a lot of energy over all those years to continue to do that.
I mean,
And I got to think that his investment in Aston Martin is probably the, you know, different. Second, this new season of life is just an investor in an automotive group. I don't know that necessarily means he wants to be team boss of Racing Point.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know what is going on. I mean, I think Toto's done a great job at Mercedes, and he took what Ross began and carried it on and made it. I think he's a significant part of their success, as opposed to what we thought of Paddy, who came along and rode on the coattails and kind of drugged that competitiveness down a little bit. He was kind of showing what he wasn't capable of, but I think there's certainly nothing wrong with the way Toto runs that team, and I think he definitely brings a lot to the table. So we don't know what's in his mind. You know, obviously sometimes you do something to get a little leverage to maybe make what you have a bit more powerful. You know, maybe it's a bit of leverage, but who knows? He's pretty set. If he moves somewhere else, I think he's going to be okay.
Yeah, he's a very savvy guy. So I would, it'd be interesting to see how the entire Aston Martin Racing Point thing evolves. I'm very intrigued by that. I mean, as long as we're not subjecting anybody to, you know, Lawrence adjusting his junk in front of him, I think we're good.
It's weird though. I can't see Lawrence and Toto being friends, and evidently they are, right? I mean, obviously we don't know them very well, but it just something. I don't know. It doesn't seem to work for me, but I guess it works for them.
Yeah, it's a weird combination.
I was just thinking, because, you know, I remember I must have been a couple years ago that Toto Wolff backpacking with his child was one of our fashion award winners. Yeah. So I just realized, like he's quarantining at home with at least a child under the age of 5. So maybe he's friends with everybody. Yeah. Lawrence, please will you Zoom call me so I don't have to deal with this child anymore? It becomes Susie's responsibility.
Susie!
Right. Right. I don't know. I was just like, oh, right. I don't know. But it was really just that one fashion award really stuck with me, that they do have a small child at home. So
you're like Toto sitting on the couch. Susie, meatloaf.
That's right. I have a job too, you know. You make the meatloaf. Right.
Yeah. Don't make it in those Williams pans. They don't work very well.
Right. So in other big news this week, F1 is set to vote on a lower cost cap. Now, we've mentioned that before. We've been reporting on this. But a little bit of twist to this story, they're also said to be voting on a new aero handicap system. Let's get the budget cap out of the way first. This cap has been reduced from $175 million to $145 million with an additional reduction over time. It will reduce a further $5 million, meaning that come 2022, it will then be $140 million, and then another $5 million onward after 2022, leaving it at $135 million. This is a big cut, and we realize, you know, Grace and Paul and I we all talked about this in the past about Ferrari saying, well, hey, we still have to keep all these people employed, and if we're not spending $200 or $300 million on the program, we're staffed to do that. So if we're not gonna be doing that, we have to look at other sporting series, something to keep all the people at Maranello gainfully employed, and fair enough. But that's the cost cap is going to be reduced to 145 starting next year.
What's Ferrari going to do with all the extra money they get?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Don't they get an extra $100 million bonus just for being Ferrari? They got to spend it somewhere.
There's
so many meals you can have out, and
Well, I would imagine this lower cost cap is going to be justification for Chase Carey saying that whole historic team payment thing's got to go. Now
that's
I don't know how. Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, good luck with that one. The other interesting element to be voted on is this new aerodynamic handicapping system that allows the poorest performing teams more CFD and wind tunnel time over the top teams. So the poorest performing teams will get a lot more CFD time and wind tunnel time that the top performing teams will not get. The increased aero development will also be coupled with the allowance to use more open source parts as well. So they will be allowed to have more open source parts that they can get, and they'll have more CFD time and more wind tunnel time. Now, Paul, having more CFD or wind tunnel time is one thing, and that helps, but it does cost money to do both of those things. Right. And I think of the old days when, like, you think of Prost, Paul and Grace, or Jordan, the team could look at their assessment. They knew what they needed to do, but they didn't have the money to do it.
Right, right. When it was an open-ended deal. Right. And which it is still, right? Yeah. I think they should just go with the Formula E fan boost method, and just give the lower teams a extra boost every time till they catch up to the Mercedes, and then turn it off again.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. I think this is very complicated, don't you? I mean, how do you manipulate this thing? I mean, once again, Formula One goes down a well of just complications that will be manipulated, and people find loopholes around it, etc. I get the theory, but I don't think they're really practiced. I don't think I think the cost cap is enough, and that's going to be hard enough to manage, rather than also manage all the other things that they're using within their cost cap, or what they're buying off the shelf and what they're not buying off the shelf. I think the cost cap alone is a big enough thing to reset the teams where they should be, and the teams that are the best teams should still be winning. Maybe the teams that don't have as much money at least get more competitive and have a few days in the sun. But I don't think we just keep tying the shoelaces of the teams in front to let the other teams, score a goal every now and again to make it close.
Yeah.
So would this be similar to, not this is what's being proposed, but like if everybody gets 10 testing days before the season starts, we're going to give those lower teams 15 days, but Williams still doesn't show up. So then it doesn't matter if they have 15 days or 10 days, they still can't get to that testing, right?
Yeah, they couldn't afford the tires, so they just sat there and polished the car on the other 5 days. Yeah.
Right. So I guess that's where I kind of see this. Like, well, okay, that's great that they can have this more development time, but they can't afford the development time anyway. So is this really helping them?
That's what I'm kind of curious about, because I was, that's what I was reading in the notes. I'm thinking. It's one thing, because I remember distinctly with Jordan and Prost, really, to a point, is they would look at it and say, yeah, we need to here's what's going on. This is where our front wing is stalling in the aero. We should be able to do this and make this design change, but they don't have the cash to go and manufacture these things, and rapid prototype them and continually, not like Mercedes does. So it's one thing to have more CFD and wind tunnel time, but you got to pay for it. And you have to pay for the fabrication and manufacturing of the parts that you design. That's difficult. Now, maybe the money they would save by doing this open source parts list thing, maybe they'll be able to save more money that way, so they could afford to actually develop what it is they prove in the wind tunnel or CFD. I don't know. But to your point, Paul, it does seem like you've got a tiger by the tail trying to manage this,
Let's just give them DRS within 2 seconds. Simplify this.
Right.
Because everyone loves DRS. It makes more passing. That's what we all wanted anyway.
Right. We have DRS. We don't need this, right?
So I guess, all right. So, right, that's another point as well. So let's say I figure out this is the best rear wing ever, but I can't afford to build it. Right? Like that you could develop something, but you have no way of executing it. So then it's not necessarily doing you any good either. Got it.
Yeah, it's my thinking anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I totally could see that. That's great. That's not really. I guess you'd really have to sit down and think about what would actually help Williams become competitive, right? Because
you could argue. I guess I could argue if Williams had unlimited CFD and wind tunnel time for the entire season, how much would that really help them and their ability to continually rapid prototype and continually to develop that car over the balance of the season? They don't have the budget to do that.
Right.
Now, it might mean that when they actually do get the shekels together to make something, that it absolutely is more impactful. That could be argued, maybe.
Yep, perhaps.
And shouldn't we just stick with pence so that I know how much these things are going to cost? Shekel is a whole nother form of money.
Bits, farthings.
Well, wait till Paul slips into a quid.
Oh, God.
Or says dosh. I don't know what's going
Nobody
on.
knows. Okay, well, so that's
an
interesting. That just seems so.
Watch
basically
this space.
Just PR.
Yeah, watch this space.
All right.
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen, says Paul, on the record. Next up.
No more radio, the rest of the race.
That's right. We're talking about one Fernando Alonso. Alonso. Look, the press are making a lot of predictions right now, and most of those predictions are centered on a possible return to Renault for Fernando Alonso next year, while others believe that Fernando is only interested in a top ride that can win titles. Perhaps he is, maybe he's not. I don't know. Maybe he's just ready for more F1, regardless of where he's at or where the team is now, and perhaps he's interested in simply being a part of F1 again. I don't know. I think Fernando said he's rejuvenated. He's ready to be a part of F1 again. Everybody says, yeah, but it's Fernando. He's not going to be interested unless he's at a top team.
He's done a lot of things that he wasn't in a top team with since he's been gone. Maybe it's changed his attitude. I mean, obviously the Toda, deal at Le Mans, that was pretty much shooting, fish in a barrel. But after that, he's attacked things for the experience rather than just I've got to win the title. So I don't know, maybe his mind has changed, and he wasn't, there was a reason why he left Formula One. It was very, with McLaren and everything, he was very frustrated, etc. But time heals some wounds, and he's definitely still a super competitive race car driver. I've never seen anything so far that says he's lost any talent whatsoever, and maybe he wants to have another go. I mean, the McLaren thing was really frustrating. It wasn't just that it wasn't a title winning car, it was barely a point scoring car. Right. I mean, literally, he had to grab that wheel by the whatsits and just try and force his way, even if it's on one wheel, for crying out loud. But just being a competitive car that maybe fight for podiums, maybe just be a competitive car, may be enough for him now.
Right. I don't know. There's most people have him pegged at Renault. I said Renault 3 years ago when he left Ferrari. I'm not so sure. I don't know now. Does Renault have the budget? Cyril Beitboul says, hey, we're in it for the long term. I've heard that before.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
He's not going to say anything other than that.
Right. So would Renault have the budget to pay Alonso money? Is Alonso charging what he used to charge? I would think not. I don't know. That would be hard to believe. Would Mercedes have an appetite for Alonso? I don't know that they would.
Alonso and Hamilton house.
Yeah, I don't think they've
again.
done that. Yeah, again with McLaren. I think Vettel would be a safer bet than Alonso and Hamilton.
They'd have better phones this time.
Right.
The rear-facing camera, everything's different.
And they wouldn't have Pedro de la Rosa leading them all astray.
That meddling Pedro de la Rosa.
Guys, I got this great idea.
Yeah. But these tires are full of helium. Oh.
I mean, I think some part of it is too, is that, so if you think about this like a job, like you and I have jobs, right? It's not just you want to be at a top team so you can win, but there's something that comes with that, right? You don't want to be working with people who also don't believe they can win. We've all had bad jobs. It's not great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, it's, to say, oh, he just wants to be the team that can win. It is, of course, about winning and, getting a championship if possible, but also about the people around you. So it's one thing to be at a, like I think McLaren now is a very different place than when he was there, it seems, and so, that would be a different shot, but it just makes it sound like he's some egomaniac, but I think we all just want to be you all just want a job that doesn't suck. That's not too much to ask for, right?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is frustration is he's one of the best that ever was, and he just didn't get the credentials that would back it up, right? So that's
right. He's a Dan Marino. It sucks, right? Like we can all see it that he was great and he was great at Renault, and it just didn't pan out for him.
Well, it was interesting. I got an email from Theo, a person named Theo, and I'm not sure.
Theo?
Yeah, I don't know who Theo is reading or listening to.
Right.
So you'll have to tell me, Theo. I don't know. But in the email, he said, "Why are we talking about Alonso again? Surely we've been there and we've done that. What in the world? Once again, we're talking about Alonso. The sport now belongs to the youth," end quote. So I got to reading that. I appreciate what Theo is saying. I completely disagree with what he's saying. First, I would argue that F1 belongs to the fastest drivers, regardless of youth, and I think Lewis Hamilton is a perfect example of that. He's at the zenith of his career. He is not Lando Norris youth, and I don't, as much as you might be excited about Lando Norris or George Russell, I'm with you. I think they're young talent, developing talent, but they're not Lewis Hamilton. Sorry.
Right. And it's there. Everyone's always excited about the potential of the new thing,
Yes.
right? But you can't take that perspective. But it's still potential till they achieve something, and we know that Alonso can achieve a lot. There's no question upon that.
Plus,
go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, plus that experience. So, again, I watch a lot of basketball, but in the NBA, we talk about how you have to eventually have a player that's been to the playoffs in order to help your team get to the playoffs, right? So, because they just know how the playoffs work. And so that helps the team move forward. So this could be the same, you see that with drivers too, right? He has that experience that has a place in the team that can bring something to the team that a young guy just can't bring because he's never been through this experience.
Yeah, I think, look, if you're newer or newish to Formula One, I think it's important to spend a little time outside of just trolling Instagram or looking at Instagram. You need to do a little bit of research to understand the dynamics at play and how these drivers develop over time to become the Lewis Hamiltons that they are. All three of us have watched the entire career, of Lewis Hamilton for sure. All three of us have watched the entire career of Vettel. Paul, you and I saw Schumacher's entire career, and all the way back, we saw Senna's entire career. Paul, you've seen them all for many years. And you've watched them develop over time and what they've become. And so to Theo's point, who is Fernando? Why are we talking about it again? At the time, before he left, he was the only Spaniard to ever win the Formula One World Championship or a Grand Prix or a pole position. And Spain, while a strong MotoGP country, had really no F1 culture to speak of. Nothing against Pedro, but they just didn't. 2 points in 2007 is the only thing between him and Kimi. Otherwise, Kimi would have been in second place. Alonso would have had the world title. 5 points in 2010 and 4 points in 2012 would have left Sebastian with just 2 world championships, and Fernando would have had a total of 5 world championships at that time. Now, I know that's woulda, shoulda, coulda, but my point here is that only 11 points over all of those seasons is the difference between Fernando having 5 world championships and the 2 that he had. And in that time, over his career, he had a DNF percentage of 21.5% DNF percentage. So you have to start looking at this and balancing and understanding the numbers behind it, the choices that are made, and the teams. Go ahead, Grace.
I was just going to say, I think this is like if you've only ever seen Michael Schumacher at Mercedes and went,
yes.
Why does everybody talk about Michael Schumacher all the time?
Right.
He wasn't that good.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's exactly right. In fact, he took one more race win over Kimi while he was at Ferrari, and that was with 56 fewer starts than Kimi. So Kimi was a world champion. So there's some context there. All four of the teams he drove for endured their worst or joint worst constructors finish for at least a 10-season period after Alonso joined them. And this, above many other factors, is why he is sometimes said to be the architect of his own shortcomings. But, and this is to your point, Paul, he joined the team at the wrong time. You know, and this is what happens. But before you say, well, yeah, but, you know, he didn't do what Lewis did where he went to Mercedes on the up. But tell me, can you tell me, folks, just how easy it is to end up in the right place at the right time on a Formula One grid of just one or two teams capable of winning championships? Do you know how hard that is to do?
Right. So it's a bit of luck, right? As with everything we do, you know.
Yes.
I mean, any sport, you know, you join a team that was, you know, won 3 championships, and then all of a sudden, you know, everything changes and everyone leaves and all the management leaves and everything.
Look at Vettel, right?
Look at Vettel.
Yeah, it's a luck of the draw, and there's nothing that, in my mind, there's nothing that, obviously Hamilton got the luck of the draw and got in the right team at the right time and carried that to ultimate success, and his talent, you know, maximized the position he was in. But there's no doubt in my mind that if Alonso had done the same thing, he would have done the same thing as Hamilton did.
No doubt.
I mean, so yeah, I think with Alonso, he's tried different things. Sports cars, he's tried, you know, doing the rallies, he's tried IndyCar, etc. But if you've still got the deep desire to drive that he seems to have, I'm not sure it's going to last forever. You want to be in the car that goes the fastest around a track that exists in the world, and that's a Formula One car still.
Right. He was only outscored by his teammate once in 17 years. He nearly took pole at the Indy 500 and probably would have won the damn thing had his Honda not blown up. I was there at that race, and I was watching him at every corner. I was absolutely gobsmacked at his talent, Paul. It was unbelievable.
There's no doubt.
Never been in, and everybody says, well, that just shows you all the drivers in IndyCar are a bunch of chumps. That's not the case, Paul. You know that firsthand. You know some of the drivers know how to hustle a car. Yeah,
there's, and you know, we talked about it before the podcast. You know, there's Formula One drivers like Marcus Ericsson, like Max Chilton. You know, they came over. They didn't do great or anything astounding in Formula One, and they haven't done the same thing in IndyCar as well. The talent base is pretty high there. I mean, it's different. Obviously, it's not all Formula One. You know, the cars are different, etc. But there's a ton of talent that I wish, you know, we would be able to see go over to Formula One to prove people wrong again. You know, but you know, Montoya went to Formula One from IndyCar. I mean, he was, JV. I mean, a lot of guys they're not given the opportunities. A lot of really talented guys never get the opportunity to move to IndyCar to Formula One. But if they did, I think they would do very, very well. And but you flourish in anything at the top line of motorsport. It shows, you know, what kind of talent you have. As you said, you were there watching Alonso. I wasn't there. Unfortunately, I watched it on TV. You can definitely see. It's subtle, but you can definitely see that the driver is making a massive difference, which is really hard to do on an oval, right? But we see Montoya do it, and we definitely saw Alonso do it. And these guys that are there that are super competitive in IndyCar, they've got experience. Alonso didn't have a lot of experience. Some of it was a lot very new, and so it was intuitive, and his intuitiveness was compelling. The whole month, the build up to it was just astounding. It was gut wrenching to see that Honda engine blow up, because it would have been great to see him fight to the finish. But there's no doubt that these guys jump in and do a great job, and IndyCar is no slouch in the driver market for sure. So.
You know, Lewis, in my mind, Lewis is one of the most talented drivers in F1 history. This is not to take anything away from Lewis at all. But on the balance of it, Fernando is the complete package. He is the absolute complete package, from technical to qualifying to race pace to all of those things. I was listening to, I don't know if you guys listened to it. Did you get a chance to listen to the Formula One podcast interviewing Nick Heidfeld?
No.
It's a good podcast because
the rest of us don't have like a little, thing that dings on our phone anytime Nick
Heidfeld
Heidfeld is mentioned,
update
right?
alert.
Like,
Heidfeld's back on TV alert. Todd rushes down the stairs, falls over. What, Nick's back. Nick's back, baby. Yeah.
So this goes way back to 2005, folks. If you're new to the podcast, I was always a big Nick Heidfeld fan, and still am. I like Nick. He's a good guy.
oh, that's terrible.
He's a champion, Paul.
Yes.
He's a champion.
He's had 13 podiums in Formula One and holds the record for the most podiums without a win. So,
yeah, I hold him and Hulkenberg on the same level.
They're both very good drivers, Paul. They really are.
They're good drivers for sure, but just didn't get that.
No, they just didn't quite get there. But I was listening to the Heidfeld interview, and in my mind, he's a very, very quick driver. He's a good bellwether measurement, though, because he's driven with all of the greats. He's driven and competed against Lewis, Schumacher, all of them. Vettel, he's driven with all of them. He beat most of the champions. He outperformed Kimi, outperformed Vettel. He's a good bellwether. When they asked him, the one guy on the grid in his career in Formula One who was the toughest that he ever competed, he said Fernando, hands down. Over Schumacher, over Vettel, over Hamilton. He said by far Fernando is the most complete driver. He said Lewis is incredibly talented. And he talked about different drivers, some being great qualifiers, but not having great race pace. He said Kimi, incredibly fast race pace, not the best qualifier. Mark Webber, great qualifier, not the best race pace, right? And he said that Fernando was all of it.
Yeah. I mean, the only chink in his armor is maybe his personality within the team is sometimes under question, but I'd agree, from the technical side of the car, his pace, being able to be there for qualifying for the race, his strategic working of a race, how, his racecraft, etc. I think the only chink in his armor is what happens to a team when Alonso is in it. And I think, he needs the whole team to be Team Alonso.
Yeah,
right. And sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes not everyone kind of buys into that as much as he'd like, and that's when things start to happen. But if I had two cars sitting there, then and Alonso came along, I wouldn't even bother asking to interview anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's this complete race car driver, and Grace, you and I've seen this, and we've talked about it. We always considered Sebastian Loeb one of those guys. Yeah, just the complete package. It's a guy that can get into damn near any car and drive it the heck out of it. And Paul, you've seen that your entire life. There are some complete race car drivers that can drive. And you throw him in a Formula One car like Alonso, he's incredible. You throw him into IndyCar, he's incredible. Throw him into a sports car at Le Mans, he wins the 24-hour law. Throw him in a rally car at Dakar, he's competitive as hell for his first shot. These are just complete drivers, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and few and far between, right? Some can be a great sports car driver. You throw him in a Formula One car, and it's like, just average, or the vice versa. But yeah, for sure, I think if you picked anything, Alonso, throw him in it, he's going to be competitive. He'll figure it out.
Yeah. I wanted to talk before we get into the awards. I wanted to talk about these drivers that are in a different level. And Grace, we've talked about this in past podcasts, and Paul, you and I have. On Race Review podcast and talk about these opportunities. Regardless of the team culture or management style, and I the reason I'm bringing this up is Heidfeld mentioned it in this interview that he did when he was at BMW Sauber versus Jordan. Just the different race team, radical, different. I would say
culture. Very different teams, yeah.
From Eddie Jordan, looniness to Peter Sauber, completely buttoned up. they were asking him, did that culture, have any impact on him from driver? He said, no, it doesn't matter what the team culture is. And I got to thinking about that in context of Fernando, Lewis, those guys. And when you're a driver of Fernando or Lewis or Vettel or even Schumacher's caliber, you are in your own ecosystem. Getting support from the team is expected when you're giving 110% and you're there to win races. You're not there to be coddled anymore or cajoled as a rookie with a new team where the team's personality weighs heavy on your own personal development. You think of like Lando with McLaren. Right now, that team culture is really important to Lando, to help him develop as a young driver. But all three of us have talked to the past. When you're Lewis, when you're Fernando, you are in a completely different world. And these champions are already developed. They need the best car and the absolute best strategy. The only time you'll see these guys get pissed is when they don't feel like they have the best car or the team isn't working at 110% like they are, or someone isn't giving them the best strategy, i.e. Vettel with Leclerc at Monza, i.e. Fernando with Lewis Hamilton and McLaren, right? i.e. Lewis at Mercedes with Rosberg. Then you will see these guys get pissed off. But that's if they don't think that the team is either 100% or they're getting the best strategy, right? And that's what you were saying, Paul. That's what Alonso expects when he walks into a team. It's Team Alonso.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that comes with the confidence of knowing that you are that talented and you are the one that's going to be the driving force. You're not there hoping that, engineer number 2 comes up with some really good rear wing that will give you a chance to be competitive with these other guys. Like, I'm not the one that's questioned here, right? Everyone else has to be questioned because if you give me the car that can win, I will win. So therefore everyone else is being questioned, and then everyone else, not that they direct every single engineering progression and evolution, but they definitely make everyone else know that they're accountable for a missed opportunity, because we know at the head of the team, the driver in the car, is not the one we're going to question for the competitiveness and the results we get.
And that's, Grace, it's a little bit why when we talk about the Alonso clause, right? Or when we talk about the Lewis, having his feet on the desk at Mercedes and Bottas come in and he's his wingman, right? But it's an interesting point where Ferrari said, no, Vettel isn't that guy. Leclerc is, and he's a young guy, right? So these are why those moves are really big gambles. Do I think Leclerc's a gamble? Of course not. But when you've got a Lewis, that system is built around him.
Well, I think, first of all, it's one thing to move from, like, I'll just use the phrase, like a jokey team culture and a less jokey team culture. But I think that there can be a bad team culture, and that nobody can work in that, right? Like, I guess I think of, I work in a field of mostly introverts. So, and I'm pretty extroverted, or more extroverted than the people I work with. So you learn how to deal with that. I know, right? And so, but I've definitely worked with more extroverted staff, and I've worked with more introverted staff, and you can work with that. But bad staff, it doesn't matter, right? So I think that, so that was my first thought. Like, when you're moving between a team that's doing their thing and a team that's doing their thing, that kind of stuff doesn't matter. But if it's a toxic culture, that kind of thing doesn't matter. But so I guess I just think that this, like, the culture, the management style doesn't matter. Well, if you're moving between 7s and 8s and 9s, maybe it doesn't matter. But if you have a 2, well, then it's going to matter, and it's going to be a problem, right? But I think that Fernando, I don't know. I mean, maybe his expectations weren't met, and that's kind of what you're getting to, right? That he expected it to be a certain way, and when that wasn't met, that didn't work for him, and then he shouldn't have to change himself to fit that, which is what I think often where this, like, he's a prima donna and high maintenance comes from, right? But the other side of that is I'm one of the top, me personally, I'm one of the top 5 greatest drivers in this world. I'm sorry, I expect you all to bend to me a little bit, right? I expect you to work around my greatness.
Well, the beauty of hindsight here, Paul, is you could say, well, but Alonso was very difficult to work at Ferrari. Okay, maybe was he? Probably. Yeah, probably was. But with Vettel and seeing what happened there, Vettel totally not that personality type. I don't think Fernando was probably wrong for leaving Ferrari.
Who's worked well there?
Yeah, who has worked well there?
Yeah.
And it remains to be seen if Leclerc will.
Yeah, it's tough to say, would the team be a little more successful if Alonso had stayed? Because if Vettel's coming there a bit more compliant, a little more wide-eyed, I want to be like Schumacher, I want to help you guys. Rather Alonso kind of a pain in the ass and saying, well, this is unacceptable. That drives the team forward. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but they have to have respect for you and what you can do. And sometimes, you bite your lip and go, well, yeah, but it's true.
Yeah,
I probably should have stayed a little later and worked on that rear end flap. But, I had a movie to see and stuff like that. But now Fernando's calling me out on it. And maybe Vettel wouldn't have. He would have been in the movies with me. I don't know. But the interesting when you talk about team culture, and it shouldn't really affect you, but Renault is, in my mind, is probably the worst right now than any of the teams. They're a bit higher on the speed charts than some other teams, but what potential they should be having and what they're actually showing is much less. They're really they're really not punching very high at all, and so I'm not sure Alonso would want to walk into there. I don't know. As I said, maybe
I don't know.
He can be, he just wants to jump in a car that can score points every week, which generally the Renaults can.
Right, and I don't think that I mean, just based on what Cyril Bitbull has said over the last couple of years, I don't know that I'd want to be his driver.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, it's not like he's going to stand out and go, hey, he's not Zach Brown, right? He's not going to be like, well, all right, we're going to all work together. We're going to figure out how to make this better. We're going to do this thing. He's like, no, it's that guy's fault. And that guy's not me. And it's not my car and it's not my team.
I think you got to be, I don't know, pretty coarse if you can't keep Daniel Ricciardo happy. Well, I mean, Dan will give you 110%. He's a hell of a race car driver. And he's got a great uplifting personality. If you can't keep him interested, there's a problem.
Yeah, but he came from a team that was very successful, and he knew how and what they did to become successful. And if you get to a team and you're saying they're not doing all the things that need to be done to be successful, the writing's on the wall, because you're not going to change the whole company infrastructure just because you're Daniel Ricciardo, right? Some, and these things take time too, but an opportunity to jump ship and not have to wait 4 years, and the hope that Cyril, will actually be understandable. I think that's the problem, really. No one understands what the hell he's saying, so no one knows what to do next.
But it is a testament also, when you think of Toto and we were talking about Toto and just what an amazing job he's done and how difficult I think Cyril's doing. And I've been saying for 2 years now they should change management there at Renault.
Yeah, just being involved in race teams as I am. I mean, the personnel at the top can make such a difference. The car is one thing, right? And, involved in sports car racing, so a lot of the cars are similar in pace because of BOP or their customer cars, etc. They're not building cars from the ground up. You can't go too far away from a competitive car if it's a competitive car. But just a couple of key people at the top in putting people in the right direction, keeping everyone on an even keel, making the right moves, the right calls. They don't have to be geniuses, right? Can make such a difference between a team. This car, this Ferrari winning races, and this Ferrari being 7th or 8th and not finishing some races. Same car, but that just a couple of key people can just change everything.
And everybody talks about certainly Jean Todt in his time or Toto Wolff, and no doubt about it. I mean, I think they're doing an injustice if you don't include Christian Horner in that conversation. I think Christian Horner has done an incredible job. And going through the whole Renault debacle and all of that, the guy knows what he's doing. I mean, everybody talks about Toto, building this juggernaut, and I don't disagree with that at all. I think Toto's done an incredible job, but so too is Christian Horner. Yeah,
for sure. And then unfortunately for Ferrari, they've had 6 different people.
Right.
So they haven't had that stalwart that's lead adds a little calmness to the team and gives everyone a common direction and progression every year.
Yeah.
But I think that's where a job is a job, right? I think we've all had that experience where, you can have the manager that goes, all right, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to just, take this, the schedule line by line, day by day. And here's what we're going to do. And we're going to figure this out. And we're going to work this out as a team. And then we've all had that manager that's just like, well, I don't know what's going on. Do you know what's going on? What's going on? And so I think that some part of humans are humans, whether it's a Formula One team or whatever the three of us do in our, everyday jobs, are going to be listening to this. A bad manager is a bad manager, and it can make all the difference.
Right. Well, is Fernando difficult to work with? Probably. Is he more difficult than Schumacher? Maybe not. I mean, I would argue that Lewis has had his challenging moments. In fact, I know he has, as well as Senna, Prost, Lauda, Vettel, Kimi, many others. When you can drive like those champions can drive, a team to you is a vehicle to deliver wins and titles, and they are in very rare air. And I can't really emphasize that enough. These drivers are in a completely different class than most of the grid and certainly the rest of the world.
I think what you're speaking to is sportsmanship. And it's easier to have some level of sportsmanship when you're Lewis and you're at a team that supports you and you are their number one than it is to have sportsmanship when that's when that's cut at every turn.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's hard to be the glue guy when nobody believes in you.
Right. And you command that kind of dedication and commitment from the team because you're delivering 100%, 110%. Paul, you don't have to look farther than what Alonso was doing in that McLaren in 2017 and 2018 to know that what he was delivering on a week-in, week-out basis was 110%, putting that car in places it had no business being in, and Zach Brown would be the first person to admit that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was frustrating for all of us to know that, the McLaren team just weren't delivering it at that point, whether you can blame Honda, you can blame McLaren, whatever, it just wasn't there.
Right.
So it was wasted years for Alonso, but he never lifted off the throttle. He was always driving like he was driving the Ferrari to the World Championship every time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's he may not be the warmest, fuzziest personality, but I don't know that you need that to win titles. To counter that, Paul, you may need a little bit of that to win the team around you that would give you titles and deliver. And that's probably the biggest argument against Alonso, is getting that team to gel around you because you're a likable person. It's those story upon story upon story of Schumacher staying in the garage till midnight, bringing in food, taking care of his team to deliver him the car he needed to win. Right?
Yeah, and I think with the McLaren, Zach understood what he had with Alonso.
Yeah.
And I think he probably catered to him maybe a bit too much.
Right.
Perhaps because of that, because he knew Alonso was the package there, but I don't know if it didn't really affect, how they ended up, but maybe affected how long Alonso stayed at McLaren just a little bit.
It could have. Yeah, it could have. So anyway, well, that is why I think Alonso coming back, whether he would come back to a midfield team or not, I don't know. That's up to Alonso. But I'm like Paul. If I've got an option to take him and I can afford him, he's in my car.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would not do that.
No. Well, Theo wouldn't.
Well, Theo wouldn't. Theo would be saying, well, you take Latifi. Nope, I'd take Alonso any day.
No, okay, so nobody's going to pick Latifi over Alonso. Nice try. I mean, really.
Oh, well, it's for the youth,
He can't even score points in the sim racing.
Right? Come on, that guy's garbage. At least pick Russell, right? I mean.
I like George Russell. I'm a George Russell fan, but if I got an option for Alonso or George, I'd take an Alonso.
I would too, but I'm just saying, you put up Latifi. I mean, that's a little...
He was trying. He was just, overdoing it just to prove a point. Yeah. But thanks for the question, Theo. We appreciate that.
Yes, I appreciate the question. All right, let's do some awards. First award is Post of the Week. All right, I got to give this to Jim. Jim, you're awesome. You're an awesome guy. He had this entire post. I'm not going to read the whole one. You got to go read.
Is he a Nick Heidfeld fan?
No, but he should be if he's
That's
not.
what gets you an award faster.
If you want an award, folks, you just send in your Nick Heidfeld.
That's right.
Favorite moments to Todd.
That's right. If you want to win an award, you let me know. You're a big Nick Heidfeld fan. Nick and Nick's mom.
I remember Nick's mom. That was always.
It was always Grace would joke that the Nick Heidfeld Club consisted of Nick's mom and me.
Yeah, that was it.
That was it. So, I know Nick listens. If you're listening, Nick, I'm a huge fan of yours, always have been. And I loved when the interview he was saying, well, then I did Formula E, which was like ridiculously slower than Formula One.
Nice, thank you. Now I respect Nick Heidfeld.
That was it.
That's right. Nick knows what he's talking.
He doesn't walk out of the moving driven and say, wow, that was amazing. It was so lifelike.
He's no Rosberg. He is no Rosberg. He doesn't come out. He just pretty much said it's crap. Yeah. So anyway, Jim had this whole post on the podcast 682 post where he talks about his remote control cars, engines. It's just awesome. He talks about slot car racing, where he lives, and it is a great read, Jim. I loved talking and reading that because I'm loving the whole RC thing. I don't know. I'm not into it. I used to have as a kid. I used to have, obviously I had racetracks when I was a kid, but I'm loving the whole concept behind that. So anyway,
You have time now.
I know. I got time now.
Quarantine hobby.
That's right. I may check it out. So thanks for that, Jim. I appreciate it. Next up is the favorite award of Grace's because it is the Lewis Hamilton Fashion Award.
Lewis Hamilton, there's no stopping him.
Get in there, Lewis.
Lewis Hamilton, there's no stopping him.
Get in there, Lewis.
All right.
Way to jump in there at the end, Paul. I like that.
Hey.
I know. Grace and I are over here. It's
you're
our vibe.
bopping your heads, etc. Stare of death. It's like,
Yeah, Paul couldn't even say admit.
I like
it's
to finish
bop.
big, Grace. I know.
You think I'd know by now?
Yeah.
Good.
It's not my first podcast with you.
Well, I hope this fancy thing works contraption that I'm using here on the screen. For those of you listeners, you'll have to go to the post of this podcast to see the picture. But for those of you watching on YouTube, here is this week's Fashion Award. I hope can you see that?
I see some hay bales.
You see that?
Yep.
It goes to Daniel Ricciardo
Farmer
for
Dan.
this picture. Describe for our listeners, Grace, what we're looking at.
All right, it's Daniel Ricciardo sitting on, some sort of like four-seater all-terrain vehicle with a lot of hay bales behind him, looking very happy. Looks like it's the continuation of Farmer Dan, which is what he's been doing in quarantine, right? So Farmer Dan's living his good life there.
He's down in
Happy as a
Perth or
pig
wherever
in
he's at.
slop.
That's right.
Probably.
So I live in the middle of America in a very agricultural area and lived on a farm when I was growing up. And this is what I love about Australia is because this is Dan working the farm. We don't look like that in America for the farmers. They don't look like this.
Especially not if you're baling hay. It's a hard job.
Yeah, it is. I bucked bales when I was young. Oh my gosh.
Right there with you. It's not fun.
And Grace, you're probably with me, bucking. Remember the alfalfa bales? Those were heavy.
Yeah. So this is not fun. So I like that he's like, I baled all this hay. I'm so excited. Nobody's ever been excited about baling hay. That's never.
I saw him on an interview with Sky, and he likes the farmer life, man. He's like, I may not be, too excited about going back in a Formula One car. Obviously, I would be, but. He enjoys it mucking around there. And if you remember the old Formula One champion, Alan Jones is a big farmer type guy too.
He's got a fallback.
Jody Scheckter, is he not?
Yeah.
He was, He had, maybe he still is. He was.
He has a farm, didn't he? With like
he started off with firearms and then moved into organic farming, etc.
Yeah.
So he's done that too. But Alan Jones quit Formula One, become a farmer, lost all his money, then went back to Formula One to get some more money. But
right.
So he can farm. It's like
Jim Clark.
Like Ferrari. He's like reverse Ferrari or something. Like he's only racing to get money for his farming.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's exactly right.
One more pass and I get the prize pig.
Yeah.
That's right. I get that baler I've always wanted.
That's right. Oh my. So that's your fashion award. And finally, it is the Sean Bratches Bravado Award. It's always fun doing the Sean Bratches Bravado Award, but I do have to think of a new name.
The man is dry. Keep him on the house.
All right. I got to give this to one Nico Rosberg. I don't know what possessed Nico to go on this big Schumacher rant, but he did. Rosberg said that Schumacher, when he was with Schumacher, they told Nico that his teammate coming into Mercedes that year like most people thought it was going to be who? Nick Heidfeld. But it was not Nick Heidfeld. It was Schumacher. And Rosberg said, oh, crap. He said that Schumacher was a psychological warrior. He said that all these small tactics to get into his opponent's head just came naturally to Schumacher. And here's what he said about Schumacher. He said they just looked at him as a god in that team. And he said, there was all these things that Schumacher did. He said there are so many examples. The Monaco bathroom, for example,
I saw this
5
interview.
minutes before qualifying, there's only one bathroom in the garage. He knows that I'm standing outside. I'm knocking like crazy, telling whoever is in there to please get out because I'm panicking. I need to pee before qualifying. He's in there just looking at his watch, chilling, knowing he's going to create more and more stress in my mind. And then with 1 minute to go, he walks out all chilled out and is like, oh, sorry, I didn't know you were there. By this time, I'm in full panic mode. He goes, it just went on. There was another example where he would love to walk around topless in the engineering room showing his six-pack because it was another statement of strength to impress everybody who was in there. His body was pretty sculptured. Just went on and on. There were infinite examples like that, end quote.
Okay.
It's like, okay. So that gets the Bravado Award. I don't know what possessed
Yeah,
him
I saw that interview. I thought that was pretty funny that all these kind of, because I think we always talk about like Rossi is the master of these, right? Yeah. Like, and he would always do those to Jorge Lorenzo, and mispronounce his name and all these little kind of things that Rossi was always really good at. So it was really funny. I thought, like there's this insight into Michael Schumacher also trying to do these kind of like little daily, mind torments to Nico Rosberg.
It's all part of the game, Paul.
Certainly is. You can imagine. Yeah. So
that's what Paul does
too. The
too.
team on his side is his public enemy number one is his teammate first, right? So that's his first competition of the weekend is try and beat your teammate before he even gets in the car.
That's right.
You've never played head games against competition, Paul, have you?
No.
No, never.
No, Paul's just always shirtless. He had to put on a shirt for the show. It's just who he is.
That's true.
He's always walking around posing with a six-pack, It's like,
they do with it at Walmart. Walmart's okay.
It's crazy. All right, well, that is it for this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Paul, Grace, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
And doing this podcast.
Whatever day it is.
I don't know. It's today. It's podcast day.
Well, it is. It is podcast day. All right. Well, hey, be sure to check out the website, theparcfermé.com. Leave your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility. If you like this podcast, go over to iTunes. Give us a little love. A huge, huge shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. We couldn't and wouldn't do this podcast if it weren't for you. Couldn't and wouldn't do that. Let that sink
look at
in.
all this artwork we have. I mean,
exactly.
Can't afford this top of the line A-line stuff.
I want to know when we get a Parc Fermé, is that like a bumper sticker on your wall? How do I get one of those?
Oh, it's part of my hippy dippy system. See, I can turn that off. I can turn that on.
Technology.
I can turn my name off and turn this, or I can turn in my comic book version of myself there, like that.
It's like how you, Grace, have the illusion of a very large wine glass.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
It's all film trickery.
Yes.
It's a huge wine glass. That thing's got an
massive
undertow
cat.
in it.
Yes.
Yeah, the massive cat was in here and left. This is not her time. So.
All right. Well, until next week when we do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.